Hi, I'm Neal, and welcome to the Ingles table. Today, I'm going to be showing you how to make a pork belly porchetta. You can get all of the ingredients you need for this at your local Ingles, so let's get started. Most people don't know that Ingles carries pork belly. They can either special order it for you or ask the butcher. My local store keeps it in the freezer in the meat department, and you had to ask for it. It's not in the case, but it is something that they stock all the time. So the pork belly is just what they make bacon out of. We're going to take this whole pork belly, we're going to score it crosshatch style on the diagonal. So we're going about an inch apart, and you don't want to cut all the way through the meat, but you want to cut deep enough so these seasonings can get down into all these nooks and crannies and season this big piece of meat. All right, so I cut it on the diagonal that way. I'm going to go 90 degrees and come back and score it in the opposite direction. And all that does is, just as you see, I didn't cut all the way through, but I cut deep enough that you're going to be able to let that seasoning get down and penetrate all those layers of the meat. First thing we're going to do, I'm going to start with some kosher salt. And this is a big piece of meat, so do not be afraid to season this liberally. I'll have the amounts. Salt and pepper is going to depend on the size of your pork belly. They're sold by weight, and each one of them is a little different sizing. So just season generously, but don't over season. Just make sure it gets down in those nooks and crannies. And we're going to come back. I'm using fresh cracked black pepper. This is a great step to do ahead and let it sit in the refrigerator overnight to let those flavors permeate the meat. It helps it develop better layers of flavor. So now I'm going to next add my dried herbs. I've got dried oregano, we've got dried whole fennel seeds. Now you might be worried that these will be crunchy when they cook. They're not. They get soft and flavorful in the meat, and they just add a big depth of flavor to this roast. Once we season this, we're going to roll it up into what's called a roulade, which is basically a fancy word for roll. Tie it off with butcher's twine. If you don't have any, if you ask nicely at the meat market, the butcher will probably give you some. I lost a few here. Make sure to get all those in there. The recipe on the website will have the list of ingredients and the amounts for what I use for this recipe. This is chopped fresh garlic. I like to use fresh garlic here, not garlic powder or granulated garlic or the wonderful garlic, what we call jarlic here, the garlic in a jar. This is a much stronger flavor, and it needs it for this cut of meat. So what I'm going to do here is take a moment and press this down into all these crevices that we created by scoring the meat. Like I said, that's going to help the meat develop flavors all the way throughout. Pork belly is actually fairly inexpensive for such a large cut of meat. It's a great alternative to some of the other holiday choices like a standing rib roast or a whole turkey or a ham. This has got some delicious, unique flavors that you don't normally see at the holidays and other large cuts of meat. So next, these are roasted pistachios. These are salted. They're out of the shell. I just ran my knife roughly through them to chop them. This adds a nice earthiness, saltiness, and some texture and some visual interest to the meat. Last but not least, this is some Laura Lynn finely shredded Parmesan cheese. This, while it cooks, this cheese melts and kind of gets in all those different areas that we sliced into the meat and just helps carry that flavor throughout the roast. I'm going to cook this low, 325 degrees, until it reaches an internal temperature of 175. And that's going to depend on exactly how big your pork belly is, but an instant read thermometer, just check it along the way. And then it's going to get a high heat sear at the end to crisp up this crust. Now I told you we're going to make a roulade. Basically all that is, you take the long edge of the meat and you roll it tightly on itself. And you're going to lose some of the toppings. It's just going to fall out. That's okay. I'll show you what you can do with that after we get it tied off. Now I'm going to move this back in here. I pre-laid my string. Basically all you're going to do, you're going to tie this in just overhand knots. This helps the meat keep its shape while it's cooking so it doesn't unroll. You want to go about every 1.5 inches, 2 inches. It's better to have too many strings than not enough. You're going to cut this off obviously before you serve it, but it just, like I said, helps it keep its shape. Another tip for doing this is, you saw when I rolled it, I got the seam side down. That just helps it hold its shape while we're tying it off. So like I said, what I like to do is get it to this step, wrap it in plastic wrap, and refrigerate it overnight to let those flavors marry. You'll be rewarded with a much more flavorful piece of meat. But if you don't have time to do it overnight, it's still delicious. It's just not as good as it would be as if you let it sit overnight. Plus, it's a great step to do ahead because this is a little labor intensive to do the day of. Gets this hard part out of the way, where if you do overnight it in the chill chest, bring it out on the counter for about 30 or 45 minutes to let it kind of come back up to room temperature a little bit while the oven is preheating. All right. And you just come back with some scissors and trim this off, these extra pieces. Now, you see this is the seam side. What you can do, if you had some stuff that came out, that's all the good flavor. I just simply tuck it back down in that cut side. There's room to tuck it back in there. This is going to go in a roasting pan on a rack and roast in the oven at 325 degrees so it reaches an internal temperature of 175 degrees. I'll come back and show you what it looks like after we take it out. We'll be right back. This beautiful porchetta came out of the oven. We blasted it with high heat at 500 degrees for about 6 minutes just to crisp up the skin. I really wish you could smell how good it smells in this kitchen right now. Thank you for trying my pork belly porchetta. There are so many more great recipes to be found here on the website, so be sure to check them out at the Ingles table section at ingles-markets.com. I'll see you next time.